The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the dusty timber building that served as Rhyolite's general store, and Nora Preston knew there was no turning back now, not with her mother's labored breathing beside her, and their last $5 tucked into her worn leather purse. She had answered Zachary Hollister's advertisement 3 months ago, a simple notice in the Boston newspaper seeking a wife to help run his cattle ranch in Nevada. And in her desperation, she had written back with complete honesty about her situation. Most men would have withdrawn their offer immediately upon learning she came with an elderly, ailing mother in tow, but Zachary's response had been swift and unwavering. He had sent money for 2 train tickets and promised that his home would be theirs, both of them, for as long as they needed it. Now, stepping down from the stagecoach onto the packed earth of Rhyolite's Main Street in the scorching August heat of 1897, Nora wondered if she had made the right choice. The town was smaller than she had imagined, just a scattering of buildings along a single dusty road, with the vast Nevada desert stretching endlessly in every direction. The air was so dry it made her throat ache, and the sun blazed overhead with an intensity that made Boston's summer days seem mild by comparison. "Mama, we are here," Nora said softly, reaching back into the coach to help her mother down. Nora Preston was only 58, but illness had aged her beyond her years, leaving her frail and unsteady on her feet. Her once bright eyes had grown dim with pain, though she tried to hide it behind a brave smile. "It is so hot, dear," Nora whispered, leaning heavily on Nora's arm. "I have never felt such heat." "We will get you inside soon," Nora promised, though she had no idea where inside might be. She looked around the street, searching for any sign of Zachary Hollister. She had only a single photograph to go by, a somewhat blurred image of a tall man with dark hair and serious eyes, standing beside a horse. The photograph had told her little about the man she was about to marry, but his letters had been kind, thoughtful even, and that had been enough to give her hope. "Miss Preston," the voice came from behind her, deep and warm with a slight roughness that spoke of long days spent outdoors. Nora turned and found herself looking up into the face of the man from the photograph, though the reality of him was far more striking than any image could have conveyed. Zachary Hollister stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of someone who worked hard for a living. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the collar of his faded blue shirt, and his eyes were the color of aged whiskey, amber brown with flecks of gold that caught the sunlight. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 28 or 29, and there was a gentleness in his weathered face that immediately put her at ease. He held his hat in his hands, turning it nervously as he looked at her with an expression that seemed equal parts hopeful and uncertain. "Yes, I am Nora Preston," she said, extending her free hand to him. "And this is my mother, Nora." Zachary's gaze shifted to the older woman, and Nora held her breath, waiting for the flicker of disappointment or regret that she had seen in so many faces back in Boston when people learned of her mother's condition. But instead, Zachary's expression softened with immediate concern. He stepped forward, not taking Nora's offered hand but instead moving to Nora's other side to provide support. "Madam, you look like you need to sit down out of this sun," he said gently to Nora. "My wagon is just over here, and I have cushions set up in the back so you can ride comfortable. The ranch is about an hour out, but the road is smooth enough." "You are very kind," Nora said, her voice trembling slightly. "I apologize for being such a burden already." "You are not a burden," Zachary said firmly, and the conviction in his voice made Nora's heart skip. "You are family now, or you will be soon enough. Come on, let us get you settled." He guided Alina toward a sturdy wagon hitched to two well-groomed horses, and Nora followed, carrying their two small bags of belongings. Zachary had indeed prepared the wagon bed with cushions and blankets, creating a comfortable nest for Alina to rest in during the journey. He lifted the older woman with surprising gentleness, settling her among the cushions as if she weighed nothing at all. "There is water in the canteen there," he told Alina, pointing to a leather flask hanging from the wagon side. "And I brought some bread and cheese if you are hungry." "Thank you," Alina said, tears gathering in her eyes. "You are more generous than we had any right to expect." Zachary shook his head, finally turning to face Nora directly. "I told you in my letters that I meant what I said. I know what it is like to feel alone and desperate. My own mother passed 5 years ago, and I watched my father try to care for her when she was ill. I would not turn away someone in need, especially not when I have the means to help." Nora felt her own eyes growing damp. For the past year, since her mother's illness had worsened, she had felt nothing but rejection and judgment from those around them. Her father had died when she was 16, leaving them with nothing, and Nora had worked herself to exhaustion trying to pay for doctors and medicine while also keeping food on the table. When she had finally admitted defeat and decided to answer the mail-order bride advertisements, she had expected nothing but refusals. Zachary's acceptance had seemed too good to be true. "I do not know how to thank you," she said quietly. "You can start by calling me Zach," he said, a small smile touching his lips for the first time, "and by letting me help you into the wagon seat. We should get moving before the heat gets any worse." The journey to the ranch gave Nora her first real glimpse of the Nevada landscape, and despite her exhaustion and worry, she found herself captivated by the stark beauty of it all. The desert was not the barren wasteland she had imagined, but rather a landscape filled with subtle colors and textures. Sage brush dotted the sandy soil, and in the distance, purple mountains rose against the impossibly blue sky. Hawks circled overhead, their cries echoing across the emptiness, and occasionally she spotted small lizards darting across the rocks. Zach drove the wagon with practiced ease, keeping the horses at a steady pace that was fast enough to make good time, but gentle enough not to jostle Alina too much. He pointed out landmarks as they went, explaining the geography of his ranch and the surrounding area. "The ranch is called the Double H," he told her. "My father started it 20 years ago, and I have been running it alone since he passed 2 years back. We run about 300 head of cattle, plus some horses. I have 2 ranch hands who help with the work, good men who have been with me for years. They live in the bunkhouse on the far side of the property, so you will have privacy in the main house." "How large is the house?" Nora asked, curious about what would be her new home. 6 rooms, Zach said. "My father built it big, hoping to fill it with children someday. There is a parlor, a kitchen, and 4 bedrooms upstairs. I have been using the smallest bedroom so your mother can have the largest one on the first floor, the one my parents used. It has windows that catch the morning breeze, and it is close to the kitchen and the washroom. Your room is right next to hers, and there is a guest room and a room I use for an office upstairs." Nora noticed that he did not mention their sleeping arrangements after the wedding, but she appreciated his discretion. They had discussed the practical nature of their arrangement in letters. He needed a wife to help run the household and eventually to have children to inherit the ranch, and she needed security and a home for herself and her mother. Love had not been part of the equation, though Nora found herself hoping that perhaps, in time, they might at least find friendship and respect. As they crested a low hill, the ranch came into view, and Nora felt a flutter of something like hope in her chest. The house was larger than she had expected, a solid two-story structure built of timber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. It was not fancy, but it looked well-maintained and welcoming, with flower boxes under the windows that held struggling but determined petunias. Beside the house stood a large barn, several corrals, and other outbuildings she could not identify. "It is lovely," she said honestly. Zach glanced at her, and she saw relief in his expression. "I am glad you think so. I know it is not Boston, and it is not what you are used to, but I have tried to make it comfortable." "Boston held nothing for us but struggle and sadness," Nora said quietly. "This is a fresh start, and I am grateful for it." He nodded, his jaw tightening slightly as if her words had moved him, and then he was guiding the wagon up to the front of the house. Two men emerged from the barn, both weather-worn and curious, and Zach called out to them. "Hank, Pete, come help me get Mrs. Preston settled inside." The men approached with their hats in their hands, respectful and curious. Hank was older, perhaps in his 50s, with a gray beard and kind eyes. Pete was younger, maybe in his early 30s, with sandy hair and a friendly smile. "This is Nora Preston," Zach told them, "and her mother Alina. They have had a long journey, so let us make them comfortable." The men were gentle and efficient, helping Alina from the wagon and into the house while Nora and Zach followed with the bags. The inside of the house was cool and dim after the bright sunlight, and Nora's eyes took a moment to adjust. When they did, she found herself in a comfortable parlor with sturdy furniture and colorful woven rugs on the wooden floor. Everything was clean and orderly, though there was a distinct masculine simplicity to the decor. Zach led them to the large bedroom on the first floor, and Nora saw immediately that he had prepared for their arrival with care. The bed was made up with fresh linens, and there were wildflowers in a vase on the dresser. The windows were open, letting in a gentle breeze, and a pitcher of water and a basin sat ready on the washstand. "Mama, lie down and rest," Nora urged, helping her mother to the bed. Alina sank onto the mattress with a sigh of relief, and Nora removed her shoes and helped her get comfortable. "I will leave you to get settled," Zach said from the doorway. "There is food in the kitchen whenever you are hungry. I need to check on some things in the barn, but I will be back in an hour or so." "Thank you," Nora said, turning to face him. "For everything." He nodded, his eyes meeting hers for a long moment before he turned and left. Nora heard the front door close, and then she was alone with her mother in this strange new place that was somehow supposed to become home. "He is a good man," Alina said softly from the bed. "I can see it in his eyes. You have chosen well, Nora." "I hope so, Mama," Nora replied, moving to the window to look out at the ranch. "I truly hope so." That evening, after Alina had rested and Nora had unpacked their few belongings, Zach prepared dinner for them in the kitchen. Nora had offered to help, but he had insisted that she take the evening to recover from the journey. The meal was simple but hearty, beef stew with vegetables and fresh bread, and they ate together at the large wooden table in the kitchen. Zach asked careful questions about their journey and their life in Boston, and Nora found herself opening up more than she had expected. She told him about her father's death, about the years of struggling to make ends meet, about her mother's gradual decline, and the doctors who had offered little hope but demanded large fees. "The last doctor said her heart is weak," Nora explained, her voice catching slightly. "He said there was nothing more to be done, except to keep her comfortable and not let her exert herself too much. I tried to care for her and work, but I could not earn enough for both medicine and rent. When I saw your advertisement, it felt like providence." Zach was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "My mother's heart was weak too toward the end. I remember how helpless my father felt, wanting to fix it but knowing he could not. All we could do was make sure she knew she was loved and cared for. "That is all I want for my mother," Nora said. "To know that she is safe and loved for whatever time she has left." "She will be," Zach said firmly. "I promise you that." Alina, who had been eating quietly, reached across the table to pat Zach's hand. "You are a blessing to us, young man. I pray that Nora can be the wife you deserve." "I am sure she will be," Zach said, his eyes flicking to Nora with an expression she could not quite read. "We will figure this out together." Later, after Alina had been settled for the night and Nora had changed into her nightgown in her new bedroom, there was a soft knock on her door. She opened it to find Zach standing in the hallway, still fully dressed, looking somewhat uncertain. "I wanted to talk to you about the wedding," he said. "If you are too tired, we can discuss it tomorrow." "No, now is fine," Nora said, tightening the shawl around her shoulders. "Please come in." He hesitated, then shook his head. "It would not be proper. Can you come out to the porch? The night air is nice." She followed him downstairs and out to the front porch, where the desert night had brought a blessed coolness to the air. The sky was filled with more stars than Nora had ever seen in her life, a glittering canopy that stretched from horizon to horizon. She stood beside Zach at the porch railing, both of them looking out at the darkness. "The preacher can come out from town in 3 days," Zach said. "I sent word before I came to get you. I thought you might want a few days to settle in before we make it official, but if you would rather wait longer, I understand." 3 days is fine," Nora said. "I see no reason to delay. This is a practical arrangement after all." Zach turned to look at her, his face serious in the starlight. "It is practical, yes, but I want you to know that I take marriage seriously. When we speak those vows, I will mean them. I will be faithful to you, and I will do my best to be a good husband." "I will mean them too," Nora said softly. "I will try to be a good wife to you, Zach. I can cook and clean and manage a household. I may not know much about ranching, but I am willing to learn." "That is all I ask," he said. "Well, that and maybe someday when you are comfortable we might have children. I would like to have a family, but there is no rush. We have time to get to know each other first." Nora felt her cheeks warm despite the cool air. "I would like children too. I always imagined having a family back when I thought such things were possible for me." "They are possible," Zach said. "We will make them possible together." He reached out and took her hand, his palm warm and calloused against hers. It was the first time he had really touched her beyond helping her into the wagon, and Nora felt a flutter in her stomach at the contact. His hand was large and strong, and there was something reassuring about the firmness of his grip. "I know this is not a conventional courtship," he said quietly, "but I hope that we can build something real here, Nora, something more than just a business arrangement." "I hope so too," she whispered. They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, looking out at the star-filled sky, and Nora felt the first stirrings of something that might, in time, become more than simple gratitude. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and adjustment. Nora threw herself into learning the rhythms of the ranch and making the house more comfortable for her mother. She discovered that Zach had been living a somewhat Spartan existence, functional but cheerless, and she set about adding small touches of warmth to the rooms. She found fabric in town and made new curtains for the parlor, arranged the furniture to create more comfortable conversation areas, and filled every available vase with wildflowers that Zach showed her how to find on the property. Alina's health seemed to improve slightly with the dry air and the absence of stress. She spent her days resting in bed or sitting in a comfortable chair on the porch, watching the life of the ranch unfold around her. Nora could see that her mother was happy, truly happy, for the first time in years, and that alone made every uncertainty worthwhile. Zach was patient and kind, showing Nora around the property and explaining the work that went into running a cattle ranch. She met the cattle, great lowing beasts that seemed both intimidating and gentle, and learned to identify which horses were used for which tasks. Zach had a particular fondness for a gray mare named Silver, who nuzzled his pockets looking for the sugar cubes he always carried. "She was my mother's horse," he explained, stroking the mare's soft nose. "Mama loved to ride even when she was sick. She said it made her feel free." "You ride often?" Nora asked. "Every day," Zach said. "It is necessary for checking on the cattle and the fences. Do you know how to ride?" "A little," Nora admitted. "My father taught me when I was young, but it has been many years." "I will teach you again," Zach said. "After the wedding, when things settle down, I will give you proper lessons. It is important that you know how to ride out here. Distances are far, and sometimes the wagon is too slow." Nora found herself looking forward to those lessons, to the prospect of more time spent with this quiet, thoughtful man who was about to become her husband. She was beginning to see layers to Zach that his letters had only hinted at. He was hardworking and responsible, yes, but he also had a dry sense of humor that emerged at unexpected moments, and a deep love for the land that was evident in everything he did. On the morning of the wedding, Nora woke early, her stomach fluttering with nervous anticipation. Eleanor helped her dress in the one good dress she owned, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. Her mother braided her dark brown hair and pinned it up, tucking wildflowers into the arrangement. "You look beautiful," Eleanor said, her eyes misty. "I wish your father could be here to see this. He would be happy knowing we are safe," Nora said, squeezing her mother's hand. "That is all he ever wanted for us." The preacher arrived at noon, a jovial man named Reverend Shaw who had known Zach since he was a boy. Hank and Pete served as witnesses, both men cleaned up and wearing their best shirts for the occasion. The ceremony took place in the parlor, with the windows open to let in the desert breeze and the scent of sage. Zach wore a black suit that looked slightly uncomfortable on him, as if he was more at home in his work clothes, but his eyes were warm and steady as he looked at Nora. When the Reverend asked him to speak his vows, his voice was clear and firm. "I, Zachary Hollister, take you, Nora Preston, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to care for you and provide for you, to honor and respect you, for as long as we both shall live." Nora's voice trembled slightly as she spoke her own vows, but she meant every word. When Zach slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, she felt the weight of it like a promise, solid and real. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Shaw said with a smile. Zach stepped closer, his hands gentle as they cupped her face. The kiss was brief and chaste, his lips soft against hers, but Nora felt warmth spread through her chest at the contact. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers for a moment, and she saw something that looked like wonder in his expression. "Hello, wife," he said softly, and Nora could not help but smile. "Hello, husband." The celebration afterward was small but cheerful. Nora had baked a cake with Eleanor's help, and Hank produced a bottle of whiskey that he claimed had been aging for a special occasion. They toasted the new couple, and even Eleanor had a small sip, laughing at the burn of the alcohol. As the sun began to set, the guests departed, and Nora helped her mother to bed. Eleanor hugged her tightly before settling under the covers. "Be happy, my darling girl," Eleanor whispered. "Let yourself be happy with him." "I will try, Mama," Nora promised. When she emerged from her mother's room, she found Zach waiting in the hallway, his jacket and tie removed and his shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked nervous, his hands shoved in his pockets. "Nora, I want you to know that I do not expect anything tonight," he said quietly. I know we barely know each other, and I do not want you to feel pressured. Your room is yours, and when you are ready, if you are ever ready, you can tell me." His consideration touched her deeply. Nora stepped closer to him, gathering her courage. "Zach, we are married now. I am your wife, and I want to be your wife in every sense. I am nervous, but I trust you." His eyes widened slightly, and then he reached out to take her hand. "Are you certain?" "I am certain." He led her upstairs to his room, which she had not entered before. It was simple and masculine, with a large bed covered in a patchwork quilt and windows that looked out over the ranch. Zach lit the oil lamp on the bedside table, casting the room in a warm glow, and then he turned to face her. "I will be gentle," he promised, and then he kissed her again, deeper this time, his arms wrapping around her waist. Nora had never been with a man before, but Zach was patient and tender, taking his time to make her comfortable. He made her feel cherished rather than simply desired, and when they finally came together, she felt a connection forming between them that went beyond the physical act. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, Zach's arm around her shoulders and her head resting on his chest. "Are you all right?" he asked, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on her arm. "More than all right," Nora said honestly. "That was wonderful." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Get some sleep, wife. Tomorrow we start our life together." Nora drifted off with a smile on her face, feeling safer and more content than she had in years. The weeks that followed were a time of adjustment and discovery. Nora settled into the rhythms of ranch life, learning to manage the household and even beginning to help with some of the lighter ranch work. Zach taught her to ride properly, and she found that she loved the freedom of galloping across the open desert on a gentle mare he had chosen for her. Alina continued to improve, gaining a little strength and spending more time out of bed. Nora and Zach grew closer with each passing day. They talked for hours in the evenings, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for their future. Zach was remarkably easy to talk to once he opened up, and Nora found herself laughing more than she had in years. He had a way of finding humor in everyday situations, and his quiet strength made her feel protected without being stifled. Their physical relationship deepened as well. What had started as tentative and gentle became passionate and comfortable as they learned each other's bodies and desires. Nora found herself falling in love with her husband, truly in love, and she could see in his eyes and his actions that he was falling too. One evening in late September, nearly 2 months after their wedding, they sat together on the porch swing watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Zach had his arm around Nora's shoulders, and she was tucked against his side, perfectly content. "I have something to tell you," she said softly. He looked down at her, his expression curious. "What is it?" "I think I am with child." Zach's eyes widened, and then a huge smile spread across his face. "Truly, are you certain?" "Fairly certain," Nora said. "I have missed my monthly courses, and I have been feeling queasy in the mornings. It is too early to be completely sure, but all the signs are there." Zach let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down. When he did, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her deeply. "This is the best news," he said, his eyes bright with happiness. "We are going to be parents, Nora. We are going to have a family." "Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. "I am more than happy," he said. "I am blessed. I feel like the luckiest man alive." Alina was equally thrilled when they told her, tears streaming down her face as she embraced them both. "I am going to be a grandmother," she kept saying, wonder in her voice. "I never thought I would live to see this day." As autumn progressed and Nora's pregnancy became more obvious, the ranch seemed to take on a new energy. Zach threw himself into preparing for the baby, building a cradle in the workshop and converting the guest room into a nursery. Alina helped Nora sew tiny clothes and blankets, her fingers slow but steady as she worked. The men in the bunkhouse were thrilled, treating Nora with exaggerated care and offering constant unsolicited advice about child rearing. Nora had never felt so loved or so at home. This harsh desert land had somehow become the place where she belonged, and these people had become her family. Zach was no longer just a practical arrangement but the man she loved with all her heart, and she could see that his feelings matched her own. On a cool December evening, as they prepared for bed, Zach pulled her into his arms and held her close, his hand resting gently on the swell of her belly. "You remember when you first arrived?" he asked. "How scared you looked stepping off that stage coach." "I was terrified," Nora admitted. "I had no idea what to expect, and I was so worried that you would take one look at Mama and me and send us away." "I knew the moment I saw you that you were meant to be here," Zach said. "I looked into your eyes and something just clicked into place. I thought I was offering you a home, but you gave me so much more. You gave me love and laughter and a reason to believe in the future again." "You saved us," Nora said, her voice thick with emotion. "We had nothing and no one, and you took us in and cared for us without hesitation. You gave my mother peace and dignity, and you gave me a life I never dreamed I could have." "We saved each other," Zach corrected, kissing her forehead. "And now we are building something beautiful together." The winter months passed slowly but peacefully. Alina's health remained stable, neither improving nor declining significantly, and she spent her days happily preparing for the arrival of her grandchild. Nora's pregnancy progressed normally, and though she had the usual discomforts, she felt strong and healthy. Zach was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying that she was doing too much or not resting enough. Nora found his concern endearing, even when it became slightly exasperating. He read every book on childbirth and infant care that he could find, asking the doctor in Rhyolite endless questions whenever they went to town. In early March of 1898, when the desert was just beginning to bloom with the first flowers of spring, Nora went into labor. It was a long and difficult process, lasting nearly 20 hours, but Alina stayed by her side the entire time, wiping her brow and encouraging her. Zach paced the hallway outside the bedroom, wearing a path in the floorboards, until Hank finally convinced him to go check on the cattle just to give him something to do. He was in the barn when Pete came running to tell him that the baby had arrived. Zach sprinted to the house and took the stairs 2 at a time, bursting into the bedroom to find Nora pale but smiling, holding a small bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "It is a boy," she said, her voice exhausted but happy. "We have a son, Zach." Zach approached the bed slowly, as if in a dream, and looked down at the tiny red face of his child. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was making small mewing sounds, his little fists waving in the air. Zach felt tears streaming down his face as he reached out to touch one tiny hand, marveling when the baby's fingers instinctively wrapped around his own. "He is perfect," Zach whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Nora. Thank you for this gift." They named him William, after Nora's father, with the middle name Zachary. Little William was a healthy, vigorous baby with a strong set of lungs that he was not shy about using. Those first weeks were exhausting, filled with sleepless nights and constant feedings, but Nora and Zach tackled parenthood as a team, supporting each other through the challenges. Alina was besotted with her grandson, spending hours rocking him and singing old lullabies that Nora remembered from her own childhood. Watching her mother's face light up at the sight of the baby, Nora felt profound gratitude for the turn their lives had taken. If she had not found Zach's advertisement, if he had not been willing to take them both in, her mother would never have known this joy. As spring turned to summer, William grew and thrived, his personality beginning to emerge. He was a cheerful baby, quick to smile and curious about everything around him. Zach was a devoted father, carrying the boy around the ranch and introducing him to the horses and cattle, talking to him about the land as if he could understand every word. One warm evening in June, as they sat on the porch with William sleeping in his mother's arms, Alina suddenly spoke up from her rocking chair. "I want to thank you both," she said quietly, "for giving me these months of happiness, for letting me see my daughter loved and my grandson born. I have been given more than I ever hoped for." Nora looked at her mother, alarm bells ringing in her mind. There was something in Alina's tone, a finality that frightened her. "Mama, what are you saying?" "I am just grateful, darling," Alina said with a gentle smile. "I want you to know that when my time comes, I will go peacefully, knowing that you are cared for and loved." "Your time is not coming for a long while yet," Nora said firmly, though she could see that her mother was more tired than usual, her face drawn with pain she was trying to hide. Zach exchanged a glance with Nora, and she saw understanding in his eyes. He rose from his seat and went to kneel beside Alina's chair, taking her hand in his. "You are not a burden, and you are not going anywhere if we have anything to say about it," he said gently. "You are part of this family, and we need you here with us." "You are a good man, Zachary Hollister," Alina said, patting his cheek with her free hand. "You have been the son I never had, and I am so grateful that my daughter found you." That night, after Alina had gone to bed and William was settled in his cradle, Nora cried in Zach's arms, terrified of losing her mother. "She is getting worse," Nora sobbed. "I can see it, even though she tries to hide it. I am not ready to lose her, Zach. I am not ready." "I know, sweetheart," Zach murmured, holding her close. "But we will be here for her every step of the way. We will make sure she is comfortable and knows how loved she is. That is all we can do." Alina held on through the summer and into the fall, determined to see William's first birthday. She grew weaker as the months passed, spending more and more time in bed, but her spirit remained strong. She delighted in watching William learn to crawl and then to pull himself up on furniture, his chubby legs wobbling as he tested his strength. On a crisp October morning, as the desert air carried the first hints of winter, Alina passed away peacefully in her sleep. Nora found her when she went to bring her morning tea, and though she had known it was coming, the grief hit her like a physical blow. She sat beside her mother's bed, holding the cooling hand, and wept until she had no tears left. Zach took care of everything, arranging the funeral and supporting Nora through her grief. They buried Alina on a gentle rise overlooking the ranch, with a simple wooden cross marking the spot. Reverend Shaw spoke beautiful words about a woman who had faced hardship with grace and had lived to see her daughter happy and her grandson born. The weeks after Alina's death were difficult for Nora. She moved through the days feeling hollowed out, going through the motions of caring for William and managing the household, but feeling disconnected from it all. Zach was patient and understanding, giving her space to grieve while also making sure she knew he was there whenever she needed him. One night, about a month after the funeral, Nora found herself unable to sleep. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Zach, and went to sit on the porch. The night was cold and clear, the stars brilliant overhead, and she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders as she settled into the porch swing. She had only been there a few minutes when the door opened, and Zach came out, carrying a blanket. He sat down beside her and wrapped the blanket around both of them, pulling her close against his side. "I miss her," Nora said quietly. I know she lived longer than the doctors thought she would, and I know she was happy here, but I still miss her so much." "Of course you do," Zach said. "She was your mother, and she loved you fiercely. That kind of love does not just disappear when someone dies. It stays with us, shaping who we are." "She loved you too," Nora said. "She told me near the end that you were the son she had always wished for. She said she was grateful that I had someone strong and good to love me and care for me after she was gone." Zach's arm tightened around her. "I am grateful for the time we had with her. She taught me a lot about grace and courage, facing her illness the way she did, and she gave me you in a way. If she had not needed care, you might never have answered my advertisement." "I think we were meant to find each other," Nora said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "All the pain and struggle, it led us here to this place and this life. I would not change that, even though it hurts." They sat together in the darkness, finding comfort in each other's presence, and Nora felt the first stirrings of healing beginning in her heart. The years that followed were good ones. Nora threw herself into life on the ranch, becoming a full partner in its operation. She learned to keep the books and manage the household finances, proving to have a sharp head for numbers that impressed Zach. She also became an accomplished rider, often joining Zach on his rounds to check the cattle and fences. William grew into a sturdy, adventurous little boy with his father's amber eyes and his mother's dark hair. He was fearless, climbing everything in sight and following Zach around the ranch like a devoted shadow. Zach was a patient, loving father, teaching his son about the land and the animals with the same care he had shown Nora. In the spring of 1900, Nora discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect, and she felt strong and healthy throughout. Zach was just as excited as he had been with William, though less anxious now that he had been through it once before. Their daughter was born on a warm August evening, arriving so quickly that the doctor almost did not make it in time. She was small and delicate, with wispy blonde hair and blue eyes that would eventually turn hazel. They named her Eleanor Grace, in honor of Nora's mother. William was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from diaper changes to feeding. He appointed himself her protector, and as Eleanor grew, she followed him everywhere, her chubby legs working hard to keep up with her energetic older brother. The ranch prospered during these years. Zach's hard work and Nora's business sense combined to make the Double H one of the most successful operations in the area. They expanded their herd and purchased more land, building a legacy for their children. Hank and Pete remained loyal employees, becoming beloved honorary uncles to William and Eleanor. Life was not without its challenges. There were droughts and harsh winters, times when money was tight and the work seemed endless. But Nora and Zach faced every difficulty as a team, their love and respect for each other growing deeper with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1907, Zach took Nora into Rhyolite for a rare night away from the ranch. Hank and Pete volunteered to watch the children, shooing the couple off with strict instructions to enjoy themselves. Zach had made arrangements at the town's small hotel, and after a lovely dinner at the restaurant, they retired to their room. "I have something for you," Zach said, pulling a small wrapped package from his coat pocket. Nora unwrapped it carefully to find a beautiful locket on a delicate gold chain. She opened it to discover tiny photographs of William and Eleanor on one side and a picture of her mother on the other. "Zach, it is beautiful," she breathed, tears gathering in her eyes. "I wanted you to have them close to your heart always," he said, fastening the chain around her neck. "Your mother and our children, the family we built together." "I love you," Nora said, turning to face him. "I love you so much, Zachary Hollister. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "The feeling is mutual, Mrs. Hollister," he said, pulling her into his arms. "When I placed that advertisement in the paper, I never dreamed I would find someone like you. I thought I would find a practical partnership, maybe a comfortable companionship eventually. But what we have is so much more than that. You are my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life." They made love that night with the tenderness and passion of long familiarity. And afterward, as Nora lay in Zach's arms, she reflected on how far they had come. She thought about the frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Rhyolite 10 years ago, desperate and uncertain, and she could hardly recognize herself in that person anymore. This life, this wild desert land, this man beside her, these children sleeping safely back at the ranch, this was everything she had never dared to hope for. The journey had been hard, marked by loss and struggle, but it had brought her to exactly where she was meant to be. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growing children. William grew into a responsible young man, taking on more and more of the ranch work, and showing every sign of being a worthy heir to the Double H. Eleanor was bright and spirited, dividing her time between helping her mother in the house and following her father and brother around the ranch. In 1912, when William was 14 and Eleanor was 12, Nora found herself pregnant once more, much to everyone's surprise. She was 40 years old, and they had not expected to have more children, but the baby was healthy and strong from the start. Their second son was born on a cold January morning in 1913. They named him Henry, and he had his mother's blue eyes and a disposition so cheerful that he seemed to bring sunshine into every room. William and Eleanor adored their baby brother, competing to see who could make him laugh the hardest. Zach, now in his early 40s, was a devoted father to all 3 children, but there was something special about holding his youngest son. Perhaps it was the knowledge that Henry would likely be their last child, or perhaps it was the perspective that came with age, but he savored every moment with the baby. "I thought I could not love you more than I already did," he told Nora one night as they watched Henry sleep in his cradle. "But every time you give me another child, every time I see you with our family, my heart somehow finds room to love you even more." "We have built something beautiful together," Nora said, taking his hand. "A family, a home, a life. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." The First World War came and went, touching their lives only distantly. William was too young to enlist when America entered the war in 1917, though he chafed at missing the opportunity to serve. By the time he was old enough, the war was over, and he settled into his role as heir to the ranch with renewed dedication. In 1920, William married a local girl named Sarah, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and brought her home to the Double H. Nora helped the young couple build a small house on the far corner of the property, giving them privacy while keeping them close. When Sarah became pregnant the following year, Nora was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandmother. She thought often of her own mother during those months, remembering Eleanor's joy at holding William for the first time. She wished her mother could have lived to see all that had come to pass, to see the family that had grown from such uncertain beginnings. William and Sarah's son was born in the summer of 1921, and they named him Zachary, after his grandfather. Zach was overwhelmed with emotion when he learned the child would carry his name, and Nora watched with tears in her eyes as her husband held his first grandchild. Eleanor married in 1923, choosing a young lawyer from Rhyolite who had the good sense to appreciate her spirit and intelligence. They settled in town, and Eleanor divided her time between helping her husband with his practice and visiting the ranch. She gave birth to twin girls in 1924, and Nora found herself with 3 grandchildren to spoil and love. Henry grew into a sensitive, thoughtful young man with a talent for music. He learned to play the guitar and would often entertain the family with songs in the evening. He was in no hurry to marry, content to help run the ranch and pursue his musical interests. As the years passed and Nora and Zach grew older, they spent more and more time simply enjoying the life they had built. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the desert, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. In 1930, on a warm spring day, they celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary surrounded by their children and grandchildren. The house was full of noise and laughter, and Nora looked around at all the people gathered there, all the love and life that had sprung from one desperate decision and one man's compassionate heart. Zach found her standing alone in the kitchen for a moment, taking a break from the festivities, and he wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I am thinking about that day I arrived in Rhyolite," Nora said. "How terrified I was, how uncertain of the future. I was so worried that you would reject us, that I had made a terrible mistake." "Best decision I ever made," Zach said, turning her in his arms so he could see her face. "Agreeing to take you both in, to care for you both. I got everything I ever wanted and so much more." "I fell in love with you," Nora said, reaching up to touch his face, now lined with age but still handsome in her eyes. "I did not expect that. I thought this would be a practical arrangement, maybe a friendship if I was lucky. But I fell in love with you, Zachary Hollister, and I have loved you more with every passing year." "I fell in love with you the moment I saw you," Zach admitted. "You were so beautiful and so brave, stepping off that stagecoach with your chin up even though you were scared to death. And when you told me your mother was with you, when I saw the love and loyalty in your eyes, I knew you were the woman I had been waiting for." They kissed there in the kitchen, a sweet, tender kiss that held decades of love and commitment, and when they pulled apart, they were both smiling. "Come on," Zach said, taking her hand. "Let us go back to our family. Let us celebrate this beautiful life we have built together." They walked back into the parlor hand in hand, and as Nora looked around at the faces of her children and grandchildren, at the home she had made, at the man who had kept his promise to care for them both all those years ago, she felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. The wild desert that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving had become the soil in which their love had grown and flourished. The ranch that had been a last desperate hope had become a legacy for generations to come. And the practical arrangement that had begun with a simple advertisement had become one of the great love stories of their lives. Years continued to roll by, bringing both joys and sorrows as all lives must have. Nora and Zach grew old together, their hair turning silver, their steps slowing, but their love never diminishing. They watched their grandchildren grow and welcomed great-grandchildren into the world, each new generation a testament to the choice they had made so many years ago. Henry eventually married a schoolteacher from Rhyolite in 1935, a quiet woman who loved his music and supported his gentle nature. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and settled into a house they built near William's family on the ranch property. The Double H remained prosperous through the Depression years, thanks to careful management and diversification. The family weathered the economic storm better than many, and Zach took pride in being able to help neighbors who were struggling, remembering his own promise to never turn away those in need. In 1940, Zach's health began to fail. He had lived a hard physical life, and his body was wearing out. But even in illness, he remained cheerful and grateful, marveling at everything he had been blessed to experience. Nora nursed him with the same devotion he had shown her mother all those years ago, and their children took turns sitting with him, sharing memories and love. On a quiet evening in March of 1941, with Nora holding his hand and his children and grandchildren gathered around his bed, Zachary Hollister passed away peacefully. He was 72 years old, and he had lived a full, rich life. The funeral was attended by people from all over the county, a testament to the impact Zach had made during his time on Earth. He was buried on the hill next to a leaner, overlooking the ranch he had loved and the land he had tended for so many years. Nora grieved deeply for the loss of her husband, but she found comfort in their children and in the memories of their decades together. She continued to live at the ranch, surrounded by family, sharing stories of their early days and watching with pride as William ran the operation with the same integrity and care his father had shown. She lived to see the end of World War II, rejoicing when her grandsons who had served returned home safely. She lived to hold great-great-grandchildren and to see the ranch continue to thrive under the fourth generation of Hollister stewardship. On a warm summer evening in 1952, Nora Preston Hollister passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 80. She was buried beside Zach and her mother, the three of them together again, overlooking the ranch that had been home to so much love and life. At her funeral, William stood to speak about his mother, his voice strong despite his grief. He told the story of how his parents had met, of the mail-order bride who brought her elderly mother and the cowboy who said he would care for them both. He spoke of the love that had grown from that simple promise and the legacy of family and home that had sprung from it. "My father made a promise the day my mother arrived," William said, looking out at the faces of his siblings, his children, his grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. "He promised to care for them both, my mother and my grandmother, and he kept that promise every day of his life. But what started as duty became the greatest love story I have ever known. They built this ranch together, they built this family together, and they showed all of us what it means to love with your whole heart." As the sun set over the desert that evening, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, the family gathered on the porch of the ranch house. They told stories and shared memories, celebrating the lives of Nora and Zach and the beautiful legacy they had left behind. The Double H continued to thrive for generations after that, passed down through the family with the same care and dedication that Zach and Nora had shown. The story of the mail-order bride and the cowboy who promised to care for her and her mother became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as an example of love, commitment, and the courage to take a chance on hope. The house still stood on its foundation, expanded and modernized over the years, but still recognizably the home that Zach had prepared for his bride. The graves on the hill were tended with care, surrounded by wildflowers that bloomed each spring. And in the hearts of everyone who came from that union, the love of Nora and Zachary Hollister lived on, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of commitment, and the beauty of a promise kept. Their story was one of ordinary people living through extraordinary times, of hard work and simple joys, of loss and love and the courage to build something lasting in the harsh but beautiful Nevada desert. It was a story that began with fear and desperation, but ended with love and legacy, proving that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the greatest rewards, and that a heart open to compassion can change not just one life, but generations to come. The Wild West had been their proving ground, the place where two strangers became partners, then friends, then lovers, and finally soulmates. The land that had seemed so unforgiving had taught them strength and resilience, while the challenges they faced together had forged a bond that nothing could break. And so the story ended not with an ending at all, but with the continuation of life and love through the generations that followed, each one carrying forward the legacy of those two brave souls who dared to take a chance on each other in the dusty little town of Rhyolite, Nevada, in the summer of 1897. Their love story became the foundation upon which an entire family built their lives, and their memory remained alive in every sunset over the desert, every child born into the family, and every act of kindness shown to those in need, just as Zachary Hollister had shown kindness to a desperate mail-order bride and her elderly mother so many years before.